How would you face the inevitable? How would you confront oblivion? Undaunted and resolute? Or would you succumb to existential despair, unmoored and purposeless? These are just some of the questions posed in beautifully tragic Clair Obscur. The citizens of Lumiere stare constantly at death. Each year, the mysterious Paintress brushes onto her monolith a number in descending order. Each year, those people of that age magically perish, brushed out of existence. As Lumiere suffers an unrelenting doomsday, it sends intrepid expeditions to the unknown wilds of the continent to halt the Paintress and save the future. Those already marked for death embark on a mission of victory or martyrdom. Thus far, no mission has succeeded, no survivors have returned, but those expeditions weren't graced by fate and consequence. This is the complete story of Clair Obscur, Expedition 33. The game begins on the island of Lumiere at the turn of the year for the eponymous 33rd expedition. The people of Lumiere have for decades lived beneath the dreadful shadow cast by the Paintress, and the weight of their existence is instantly impressed. Gustave and his adoptive family Maëlle participate in a festival, a ceremony filled with joy and sorrow as friends, families, and loved ones embrace one final time before the gommage. The gommage is the Paintress's power made manifest. As she stirs and erases the number 34 in the distance, so too are those in Lumiere of 34 years erased. They disappear in a mist of rose petals and chroma, a beauty that can't seal the void of death, nor offer solace to those who remain. Gustave, himself a 33-year-old, cherishes the final moments with Sophie, his love that was not meant to be, before she vanishes in his grasp. Tomorrow comes, and tomorrow he, alongside a couple handfuls of other brave expeditioners, will set off on untold dangers on the continent in a desperate attempt to preserve their people. The Paintress and the gommage have stolen not just the future of all those whose lives have been cut short, but also the future of Lumiere and its past. But before we follow Gustave, Maëlle, and the others of Expedition 33, how did the world come to this, and what of the Paintress and her power? The game transpires near the climax of a story that, to appreciate fully, requires us to travel through many years and other dimensions of reality. It begins with a family and their manor. The Descendres were a family of 5 with exquisite taste, a penchant for luxury, and blessed with supreme powers. The Descendres were all painters, a word that describes not just a vocation but a magical skill. Painters have complete mastery over their medium. They demonstrate the capacity to fill their canvases with beauty and wonder, to bring their creations to life in more ways than one. How exactly they came across this ability remains a mystery, but without question, the Descendres are among the elite painters. Aline, a genius of the craft, met and married Renoir, then proceeded to teach him all she knew. The couple raised and tutored 3 children that brimmed with potential. Verso, their only son, was the cherished child, a protege much loved. Despite his longing and devotion for the musical arts, and especially the piano, Verso was resigned to take up brush, forcefully coaxed to follow his parents' path. Clea, the eldest daughter, was disciplined and determined. She seemed more realist than dreamer, and appeared to carry much of the siblings' collective responsibility, perhaps envious of her brother's position as favorite. Clea's singular focus on painting rewarded her with unequaled skill. Alicia, the youngest daughter, was the idealist to conflict with Clea, lost in daydreams and fantasy, and at times drifting into the world of words rather than images. All 3 proved diligent and produced many mystifying painter creations during their tutelage. Their art wasn't just a reflection of internal emotions, but quite literally a doorway into different realities. Painters possess a unique ability to enter and explore the canvases they create, as if they were other worlds or pocket dimensions, suffused with life. At a whim, they brush into existence whatever their minds conjure. Each sibling had their fascinations, their own personalities that they painted onto their works. Throughout his childhood, Verso frequented one canvas in particular, perhaps even the only canvas he ever produced. A world of youthful imagination where forests shone luminescent, where fish flew through above-ground oceans, and where his obsession with trains and music materialized into vast rail networks and ubiquitous instruments. Verso populated this world with a comic and curious race of creatures called Gestrels, and a more verbose, furred race called Grandies. It's reasonable to assume that at this time the young boy also painted two companions that became his closest friends. Esquier, a rotund and jolly character, and the monkey Gestrel Monoko, named after the family dogs. Esquier in particular helped Verso through depressive bouts that resulted from the dreams that were suppressed in favor of his parents' ambitions. As the siblings matured, they were pulled from infantile whimsy into reality riven by politics and danger. The painters weren't alone in their mystical power. A rival faction known as the Riders opposed the Painters' Council and worked to undermine their influence. Precious little is known of either of these groups, but the Riders seem to have powers on par with the Painters, transforming their words into reality, giving emotion and creativity a corporeal form. Alicia, now in her teenage years, through naivety and ignorance, becomes enmeshed in the conflict between painters and writers. It's her interest in books and words that draw her towards the writers, a fancy her sister Clair blames for what next unfolds. Alicia's association opens vulnerability, and catastrophe strikes the house of Desange. The exact nature of events is hopelessly muddied by incomplete flashbacks and opaque dialogue, but Alicia's life is endangered when a fire, started by the Writers' Guild, bursts into a conflagration that consumes the house. Canvases catch, the manor glows with doom, and in the next moments Verso acts without hesitation. He uses all his power to pull Alicia from the licking flames, but not before her face and throat are terribly burned. She survives, but Verso isn't as fortunate. To save Alicia, he forfeits his own life. A terrible pall falls over the family, who lament the loss of their cherished son. Verso's death and how the family grieves are the catalyst for everything that next transpires. Each member of House Desange mourns Verso's loss in their own way, but for Aline, his absence is a gaping void in her heart no amount of time can mend. She retreats within herself, shuts out her family, her anguish, unable to cope with reality. Time passes, the tension between the painters and writers builds, and Clair steps into her mother's leadership role as Aline fades further from this world. Renoir feels his wife slipping, their relationship stretching to its limit. He blames his own blindness for the tragedy, but remains blind to Aline's pain.
We don't even share the bonds of grief anymore. She walks her path, and I walk mine. I don't exist to her. None of us do. She's left us all behind to drown by ourselves so that she can drown alone.
Clair seethes with anger, a fury stoked into vengeance and directed at the Riders. Remorse and regret, meanwhile, consume Alicia, who suffers beneath Aline and Clair's silent blame. The Desange crumble from the inside. At some point, Aline discovers a tiny sliver of her lost son remains in Verso's childhood canvas, the one in which he, Esquier, and Monoko adventured. A fragment of his soul is magically preserved within the painting, and it's this tiny filament that Aline grasps to alleviate her heart's burden. We hear in her journal entry.
His little grin. So proud of his latest creation. But at least those memories remain. What hurts more are the memories unmade. The conversations we'll never have. The time we'll never spend. I know what he'll say. But this is the first time I've felt any surcease. For a few moments a day.
The memory of Verso is a balm for Aline, who's unable to grapple with his death. She spends more time within the canvas, cloisters herself further, as time spent in reality only reminds Aline of the pain, magnified any time she looks upon Alicia.
The person I cannot be around is Alicia. Her pain is a broken mirror. The shards reflecting back tenfold, and every moment with her the cuts deepen and I feel myself unraveling.
These are the signs of immense grief Renoir later blames himself for not realizing earlier. From the loss of his son, Renoir is losing his wife. Aline soon escapes entirely, extending her visit to Verso's painting indefinitely. This is a dream in which she can immerse herself, can brush over history and paint her family anew, complete. She immediately reconstructs her hollowed life. Like a child playing house, Aline renders a facsimile of her reality with meticulous care, going so far as to painting her home region into existence and populating it with people. As a paintress and the new master of the canvas, Aline controls all of the chroma in this reality. Chroma, color, paint. It's wielded by a painter to create, destroy, or alter at a whim. For the beings that live within the canvas, chroma is an aura, an energy that feeds life. It is their essence. Aline creates Lumiere and its people, replicates the Descendre manner, and to fool herself completely, paints duplicates of her family not as they are, but as she sees them. Renoir, Clair, Alicia, and especially her son Verso are brought to life within the canvas to comfort Aline in her grief. Time in the canvas doesn't pass the same as time in reality. It's not quite clear how long Aline's spirit resides, how many years the people of Lumiere pass in a breathtaking and peaceful world, but it's bright and full of hope. Perhaps generations are born and raised within Lumiere. Most interesting is that these people, painters' creations, aren't simply golems made to mimic certain behaviors devoid of soul. They have, in essence, consciousness and an independence that parallels humanity in the outside world. The people of Lumiere are willed, a fact that ripples into character motives and decisions far into the future. For now, the paintress Aline satisfies herself with a fictitious family, either painting memories of their real lives within them, or else raising a new family. As we often hear Verso speak of his childhood in and around Lumiere.
It's been a while since I've been here.
Verso.
We used to ski here, before the fracture.
But the powers of a painter are treacherous. They can't remain in their works for long without risking mental instability, loss of self, and even death. To create, they must sacrifice a part of themselves. For a time, the real Renoir indulges his wife in her grief, but as days slip, so does her mind, and the Descendre family sees plainly how Aline's torture consumes her. As a man who cares most about his family's safety and claims responsibility for their protection, Renoir reviles the childhood canvas as it slowly eats Aline from the inside out. Something he has experienced in his own past and relied on his wife to save him.
I know how powerful and intoxicating it is. How deeply attached we can become to the worlds we pour our hearts and souls into. I was enthralled, and it nearly killed me. Your mother was the one who saved me when I lost myself in a canvas.
Not only does his wife wither, but the writers continue to pressure the painters, and at Clair's insistence, Renoir enters Verso's canvas to recall Aline, by force if necessary. To enter another painter's canvas is to be at their mercy, but Renoir is skilled and adamant. He doesn't allow himself to be brushed over by his wife, doesn't lose himself in her overwhelming chroma. He confronts Aline in the painted world, but she won't listen to his reason. She's needed in their reality, but she can't countenance parting once more with Verso, and her mind cracks beneath the weight of prolonged canvas exposure. Renoir delivers an ultimatum: return to her true family, or he'll destroy the canvas world and pull her out. Their conversation heats, transforms into argument, then brings forth a calamity the canvas has never seen. These aren't simply two people, they are two painters, gods of the canvas world that wield immeasurable power. It's a divine battle, the aftermath of which tears the world asunder, a cataclysm referred to as the fracture. The continent, which up to this point had been whole, shatters into many fragments. Some lands are submerged, some suspended in the sky. Lumiere is split, and most of the human inhabitants are severed from the mainland, perhaps Aline's attempt to spare Lumiere from her husband's spite. It's a deadly and horrifying battle that rages for some time. Renoir sends a dissolving shockwave throughout the pocket dimension that attempts to brush all things out of existence, the first gommage. But Aline controls the canvas's chroma and counteracts him, preserving the lives she's created. Renoir next attempts to remind his wife of her real family, the people who desperately need her in the real world. He paints massive beings of great power into existence, creatures named axons. 4 in total are crafted, but only 2 are active following the fracture. Each symbolizes one member of Renoir's family. Sirene, the mesmerizing dancer, is his beautiful wife Aline. The Mask Keeper, enigmatic who hides his true self beneath falsehood, represents Verso's acceptance of his parents' request. He wears a mask of obedience while in his heart he remains a musician. The third axon, unnamed, is Clair. Like her, it bears the enormous weight of responsibility on its shoulders. The fourth, the Reacher, to symbolize Alicia, her strive for forgiveness and Renoir's hope that Alicia will rise above Aline's blame. These beings were previous creations of Renoir, their art displayed on the walls of his atelier within the manor. This could be why they possess such strong chroma resonance. The axons are perhaps meant to shock lucidity into Aline, and if they fail, perhaps to sow destruction. Still, Aline holds on to her reality and resists. The 2 painters find themselves locked in stalemate. Aline erects an indomitable mountain of stone called the Monolith, and imprisons Renoir beneath, preventing him from dissolving the canvas, while Renoir attempts to disrupt his wife's chroma collection and slowly drain her. The fracture represents the schism between the Desange family, their destructive grief, their shattered house. This correlates in-game to the various rooms and doors tying the family's painted manor together, scattered across the continent, pieces that must be gathered to rebuild the whole. Now, Verso's canvas is more than just a couple's feuding ground, and much happens to its inhabitants during and immediately after the fracture. The people, gestrels and grandees, know nothing of the painters, of the realities and dimensions that exist beyond. They're concerned with the present, which involves mostly recovery. Communities have been upended, thousands have perished, and many more are missing. Gestural villages send out searchers to look for their lost kin. Lumiere too gathers shards. This was the form and purpose of the very first expedition. The painted versions of Renoir, Clair, Verso, and Alicia involve themselves heavily with this effort. With the rest of Lumiere, the Desanges seek answers. As beings of the canvas, they're tied to its fate, and work to help Aline in what ways they can. Not just that, they've formed real connections with fellow painted creations. A critical example is Clair's relationship with a man called Simon, who had also been a longtime friend of Verso. A large volunteer force sets out to find survivors and uncover the nature of the monolith. This is the legendary Expedition Zero, led by the painted Renoir Desange. Their mission coincides with the emergence of something new and terribly deadly that will forever endanger the continent, the Nevrons. Nevrons are bizarre creatures alien to Verso's canvas, painted by neither Aline nor Renoir. Aggressive, merciless, and attracted to the lifeblood of chroma, Nevrons are Clair's creations. When she realizes that her parents' dispute hasn't resolved, the Desange eldest daughter takes matters into her own hands. Threatened by the riders, Clair desperately needs her family back. She can spare little time in Verso's canvas, but enters to tip the struggle in Renoir's favor. Clair confronts her painted counterpart, and dissatisfied with her mother's work, paints over it with stinging venom. This is a testament to Clair's skills as a paintress.
Claire's the only one skilled enough to paint over someone else's creation.
The painted Clair is twisted, her mind corrupted and filled with new purpose. She's locked in the canvas's furthest reaches and forced to produce Nevrons ad infinitum. Nevrons hunt chroma-based beings. Upon death, the chroma remains trapped in their victims' bodies.
The dead here don't disappear like in Lumiere. Their chroma stays inside their bodies.
Something about the way Nevrons kill seems to affect our chroma.
Clair reckons that trapping chroma will deplete Aline's reserves, slowly weakening her until the canvas can be destroyed. The Nevrons are loosened and rampage across a continent still stunned by the fracture. Fragments of that terror live on in the journal entry of this survivor, which paints a bleak picture for those in old Lumiere.
Melanie, 5th of February. The Brigadiers are overdue from their mission to the monolith, and we've lost half our remaining fighting strength to these creatures and their relentless assault. All adults have taken up arms, but I'm a bookkeeper. What am I supposed to do? Count them before they slaughter us? We've hidden the children. At least they're warm and dry in the cellars, but rations are running low.
Clair continues the destruction of her painted counterpart's life by approaching her love, Simon. As she appears no different than the painted Clair, Simon falls for her deception.
My beautiful Clair. What did she do to you? That Paintress. She fooled me. She looked so much like you, and I believed her story. She granted me the power to fell the axons and enter the monolith. I realized too late that she had warped my mind. That she had in fact taken you away, locked you somewhere I could never reach, and set me on a path to destroy your future.
The real-world Clair resents all painted interpretations of her likeness. She wants the canvas destroyed, or at least sealed. It could be from spite that she has Simon destroy her axon in Lumiere, but it can't be overstated how much power he wields. We see the many blades of light he's used to fell creatures across the continent. The axon's death liberates a significant amount of chroma, which Clair uses to weaken Renoir's prison. Though the monolith and its surrounding energy barrier remain intact, Renoir's powerful influence seeps through the cracks. Clair's last act before leaving the canvas is to confront Expedition Zero directly outside the monolith's chroma barrier. According to Verso, it's here that she tells the truth of the fracture, of their existence and their reality, then warns the group from interfering in Painter's concerns. When they refuse, she slaughters Expedition Zero. Only Renoir and Verso are spared, preserved by Aline's power. As master of the canvas, she protects her painted family from real-world influence, a form of immortality. And so, the continent settles into a new, unstable equilibrium following the fracture. Renoir, still trapped, nonetheless casts his destructive power. Nevrons produced by the corrupted Clair rampage and lock chroma from returning to Aline, whittling down her magic. Aline's creations of the foggiest memory, those that go furthest into the past, are most vulnerable, and as her power slowly wanes, are ruthlessly culled by her husband. They dissolve in a burst of chroma and petals. Thus begins the cycle of the gamage. The Paintress, controlling a large mannequin, brushes in blazing text the number 100 upon the monolith that has become her prison as much as her husband's. This is her warning Lumiere of the coming destruction, that only a century remains until her power is lost completely. That each year, those oldest creations will perish. But Lumiere conflates correlation with causation. They believe the gamage is her doing, a misinterpretation that couldn't be further from the truth. While Lumiere rebuilds and tries to understand what's happened to the world, the tale of the Paintress and the legendary effort of Expedition Zero take root. Eventually, old Lumiere and the continent are completely abandoned, overrun by Nevrons as people flee to the island safety of New Lumiere. The painted Renoir, enlightened to the truth, remains on the continent with Alicia at their manor. Like the real Renoir, his strongest urge is to protect his family. He revels in his Paintress-given immortality and realizes Aline's mission is aligned with his own. To protect the painted Desange, he must preserve the canvas. Verso's motives and emotions are less clear. After the failed Expedition Zero, he returns to Lumiere but is met with suspicion. We hear this in the journal entry of Julie with Search and Rescue.
I know what I saw. He died. Fucking died. That attack destroyed half his torso. There's no walking away from that. He and his father keep saying the Paintress is the solution, not the problem. But I don't buy it anymore. I think they're lying about what happened to Expedition Zero. It hurts to think he'd betray us. But nobody ever expects to be betrayed. And if he is a traitor, then he will share the fate of traitors.
Once Verso's close friend, she believes he's betrayed his people. Renoir has his own suspicions and fears that some in Lumiere are actually Clair's creations, painted to bring an end to their world. With Renoir's whispers in his ear, and with Julie's attempt to arrest him, Verso's forced to act.
Julie, forgive me. I'm not a traitor. I'm trying to save us all. Papa believes you're Clair's creation, and even if you're not, we can no longer trust you. But I think you just wanted answers.
Though still on his father's and the Paintress's side for the moment, this tragedy pushes Verso towards a crisis of faith, and he withdraws from Lumiere. 15 years pass. Lumiere sits protected on its island underneath a magical chroma barrier called the Dome, invented by brilliant minds to rebuff Nevron assaults. The city is governed by the Council, who direct efforts in science and learning, performance in the arts, agriculture and industry. It's a charming existence, but one constantly overshadowed by the monolith. It's at this time, Monolith Year 84, that the people of Lumiere understand what the mystical Paintress's number represents. That each year she marks her countdown, people aged to that number vanish in Gommage. Shockwaves of panic and alarm ripple throughout Lumiere and stir them to action. They invoke the legend of Expedition Zero and establish a new type of expeditionary force, focused not on search and rescue, but rather on learning the truth of the Gommage and putting it to an end.
We landed at the exact spot where Expedition Zero touched ground and retraced their route. Bloody hell, we're out here chasing shadows. 15-year-old shadows. I'm glad we restarted the expeditions. But how the hell are we supposed to find them? No trail could last 15 years.
84 is the first in the golden age of expeditions. This is a time where Lumiere's population is still high, where hundreds to thousands willingly volunteer themselves for the expeditions out of a sense of duty, a desire for adventure and freedom, or a curiosity about the world to be satisfied. Though none ever return from the continent, and though the Gommage wipes out younger and younger individuals, the people of Lumiere remain undaunted in their mission. It's around this time that the real Clair makes a second entry into the canvas. She approaches Verso on the continent and attempts to recruit him to her cause. That is, the release of the real Renoir and the destruction of the canvas. Already disillusioned by his painted father's merciless treatment of Lumiereans and egocentric streak, Verso begins to question his own purpose and meaning as nothing more than a canvas creation, an object to satisfy a mother's repose. Aline created a masterpiece in Verso, however, and though he's a facsimile of the original, the painted Verso has real concern over Aline's well-being. It could be here that he joins Clair and Renoir in opposing the Paintress and her painted husband. More years trudge by, the Gommage claims thousands, and still Lumiere hears no word on the success or failure of each expedition. A credit to the people, they continue with grim determination, a sentiment heard in their mottos, for those who come after, and tomorrow comes. The struggle against the Paintress, whom they believe responsible for the Gommage, isn't an individual battle, it requires all of them, and many of the early expeditions stand united. Some, like 70 and 69, establish grappling points and climbing holds to aid future expeditions. And in many other journals we hear of large, extensive undertakings to the continent. The corpses, piled within the forgotten battlefield, demonstrate the immensity of Lumiere's collective struggle, but the expeditionary fervor can't last. As more decades slip without a breakthrough, hope fades to despair. The Gommage ravages Lumiere and the population dwindles. Its most insidious tragedy is that the Gommage erases the history and collective memory of Lumiere with incredible speed. As people live shorter lives, the knowledge of what came before is pushed further from them. Elders have fewer decades of experience as generations are compressed. Memories of old Lumiere and the continent before the fracture fade into obscurity. Gestrels, Grandies, and even the Nevrons are wreathed in myth. In the face of oblivion, Lumiere gives way first to hysteria and then resignation. From journal entries in Monolith years 60s to 50s, we hear that faith in the Council and expeditions waver. Fewer people volunteer themselves to the cause, and many openly resist. Those deemed traitors to Lumiere are forcefully sent to the continent.
Lumiere operates a certain way. It favours a certain group and a certain outcome. And if you question the Council, well, the Council is going to question you. Push too hard to change things, and you just might end up on the next expedition.
Through other entries left by those who came before, we hear suspicions of sabotage, of white-haired individuals thwarting expeditionary efforts. We hear too about the discoveries made on the monolith that unfortunately don't reach Lumiere.
But it seems we've been wrong about what she is. The Paintress is just as trapped as we. The real terror lies beneath the monolith.
Panic-stricken and depopulated, Lumiere weakens beneath the oppressive weight of the Paintress and her successive gommages. The golden age of expedition fades, civilization grows complacent, numb, and indifference cools their existential struggle. In Expedition Year 49, 16 years before the current day, a real-world event significantly alters the trajectory of the canvas. Alicia, who's brooded in guilt over her brother's death and remained sidelined in her parents' struggle, finally acts. A conversation with Clair suggests that Renoir and Aline are still locked in stalemate and that her elder sister is indisposed to help. With her focus on the riders, Clair suggests Alicia enter the canvas and end the parents' feud.
If you really want to be useful, then enter the canvas and help Renoir. I need him back here sooner rather than later.
Before she enters, however, Alicia tries to compromise by stealing Verso's canvas and hiding it someplace she can't imagine her parents will find.
If we bring Maman out of the canvas, she'll try to return. We must hide the canvas.
Well reasoned. And such a clever hiding spot you've chosen.
Much is left to speculation, but a possibility is that Alicia transported the canvas into another painting. We see hung in the Desange family manor a small painting barely worth notice, created by Alicia. It's perhaps within this that Verso's canvas resides. She hopes that by doing so both her parents will be partially satisfied. Aline because part of Verso still survives, and Renoir because his wife won't be able to find and re-enter the canvas. With her plan set, Alicia ventures into Verso's realm. She's not as strong as Renoir or Aline, not as masterful as Clair. As she falls through the painting, she's overcome by Aline's chroma. Alicia loses herself as her mother's brushstrokes remake her. She enters the canvas as one of its creations, locked from her memories and much of her own power. Alicia is born into a family who are soon destined to be gommaged. They name her Maëlle and spend brief time with their daughter before she is orphaned, set adrift in a world that isn't her own with no recollection. A child marked by destiny to bring either death or salvation. Clair realizes her sister's failure and enters the canvas a final time. She remains long enough to inform the painted Verso of the situation and entrusts him with Maëlle's safety until she's old enough to regain Alicia's identity. As the monolith continues its relentless countdown, desperation revitalizes the expeditionary force. Bereft now of all people above 40, Lumiere offers what little it can, but these perilous expeditions are just a fraction of what they had once been. Despite this, they're armed with deadly weapons and magic. Lumiere has made many breakthroughs in its history. The people have learned to channel chroma, using it as an energy source to empower spells or craft armaments. Their power is further bolstered by the invention of Pictos, glyphs and emblems that amplify chroma for the user. Weapons are also configured with elemental energies to combat specific Nevron affinities. Near the end of Monolith Year 34, Gustave, an intrepid scientist, works alongside another brilliant mind in Lune to develop the Lumina Converter. This device further builds upon the foundational Pictos, gathering and invigorating chroma to provide long-lasting, powerful effects.
The pull of chroma grows as we get closer to the monolith. But thus far, we've been unable to tap into those flows. Maybe Gustave's idea to convert chroma from Pictos to... what did he call it? Lumina? Maybe that's not so crazy after all.
Gustav, alongside his sister Emma, are the adoptive family of Maëlle. They've sponsored the girl since her parents gommaged, and the three have grown inseparable. Gustav, 33 years old, has little over a year left, and has been for a long time, diligently preparing himself for expedition. Though Maëlle's only a teenager, she's filled with a fiery wanderlust to escape Lumiere and join her brother's journey. And so, we approach the opening moments of Expedition 33, a story told in 3 acts with many characters, trials, joys, and heartbreak. We have on one side the real Renoir, who wishes to destroy the canvas not out of evil, but from a desire to save his family. He's trapped beneath the monolith, but continues to gommage Aline's oldest creations, slowly erasing the canvas. He's aided by Clair, who needs her family back to confront their rivals. She can't stay in the painting, so indirectly relies on the efforts of her transformed painted self and the Nevrons to drain Aline of chroma. On the other side, we have Aline, known to all as the Paintress, who wishes to drown her grief, surrounded by an artificial but complete family. She can't accept Verso's loss and holds on to the last sliver of his soul within the painting until madness and death ultimately take her. She's aided by the painted version of her husband Renoir, who's not only grateful for his immortality, but possessed of an innate will to protect his family and preserve the painting. The painted Alicia vacillates. Filled with remorse, inadequacy, and an aversion to conflict, she tries to mediate her family's quarrel. Verso, meanwhile, has long since cut ties with Renoir and Aline. He knows the Paintress doesn't belong here, and her creations shouldn't exist. Caught between is Lumiere and the rest of the canvas, ignorant of their reality and of the gods whose clash has upended their world. They are mistaken in their belief that the Paintress, not Renoir, is responsible for the gommage. Her warning is made to be a threat, and they throw all their might behind the expeditions for answers and hope for a future. Act 1 opens with the force of Lumiere's reality thrust into the fore. Monolith Year 34 is in its final moments, and the city prepares for gommage. Thousands of leis and bouquets commemorate all those who have been and are about to be taken prematurely from the world. Gustav spends this time with Sophie, a 34-year-old about to be brushed from existence. The pair have long shared a deep connection, but differences in ideologies kept them apart. Their relationship highlights just 2 of the myriad thoughts on life and the gommage in Lumiere. Some hold stubbornly onto future's hope, while others wish only to cherish their final moments of the present. As the Paintress stirs from her melancholy and replaces 34 with 33, the gommage sweeps over Lumiere and steals from this grieving, weakened city its oldest members. It's in the wake of this yearly tragedy that expeditions muster the resolve necessary to embark on their mission to the continent. Gustav dedicates his final year to the expedition. He feels a sense of duty and responsibility in Lumiere's salvation. Armed with his Lumina converter technology, he hopes to fare better than previous expeditions. 33 is a paltry host, signs of Lumiere's exhausted desperation. Only a couple dozen volunteers gather in the city's port. Gustav is joined by his fellow scientist Lune, his friends, the farmer-turned-tutor Ciel, and led by Commander Alan. The expedition's most peculiar addition is 16-year-old Maëlle. With roughly a decade before her own gommage, she isn't yet expected to sacrifice her life for Lumiere, but her entire existence has felt foreign to her. Lumiere a prison, the continent calls to her with whispers of escape. Under a solemn sunrise suffused with potential, Expedition 33 embarks. In an auspicious stroke, Lune has discovered the footsteps taken by legendary Expedition 0, and they follow their trail to recreate their success.
Theoretically, extrapolated from the archives, but it was 67 years ago. So much of the landscape has changed.
But disaster awaits. The vessel lands on the dark shores, and a stranger materializes from the mist to confront them. A man of advanced years who miraculously survived the gommage. Confused, their questions are answered by violence. This is the painted version of Renoir. For decades, he's been sabotaging and slaughtering expeditions for the Paintress. With power exceeding anyone present, Expedition 33 is thrown into immediate disarray, made deadlier by the arrival of Nevrons. In the bloodbath, most expeditioners perish, and Gustav is knocked unconscious. He awakens wounded, alone, in a strange and dangerous land. He stumbles upon a pile of Lumieran corpses, frozen in webs of congealed ink and petrified chroma. Despair pushes him to the precipice, everything he thought and planned for dashed in a moment. With gun to head, Lune's presence saves Gustav. She's also survived the initial landing. Lune is a strong character of protocol and determination. The pair support one another and press on to the designated rendezvous in search of more survivors. The continent is beyond their wildest imagination, filled with both breathtaking wonder and terrible danger. The pair find many dead, but a note details Mael's survival and movement to safety. This note, unsigned, is left by the painted Verso, who fulfills his obligation to Clair and pulls Mael from danger. He's brought her to the dimensional anomaly of the manor, the shattered facsimile of the Desange household. That Mael is in Alicia's room foreshadows her true identity. After a heartfelt reunion, the remains of the expedition are now 3, and their hopes are buoyed. A mysterious and ethereal shadow called only the Curator haunts the manor's corridors. Of his nature, we hear that
the chroma around him. It's quite different from the Nevrons.
Besides an otherworldly aura, the Curator possesses peculiar affinity towards Mael. More light will be cast on this figure in the future. The company makes deliberate, if circuitous, progress towards their goal, which pulls them across the continent. They walk the foreboding ruins of Lumiere burrows long lost to the fracture. Legends and myths are revisited, the tales of old viscerally experienced. They cross paths with Gestrals, the ancient race that has slid into folklore within Lumiere. As mentioned, the Gestrals were creations of young Verso, original inhabitants of the canvas. They were born from immature fancy and retain many childlike characteristics. Optimistic and keenly trusting, the Gestrals make up for in pluck what they lack in intelligence. They are curious and adventurous. Their merchants can be found in all corners of the continent, and though the primary Gestral colony protects itself within a sanctuary hidden since the fracture, its itinerant searchers look in vain for Gestrals lost to the calamity. The Gestrals are a warrior race, ruled by the strongest among them, who presides as chief, currently the indomitable Golgra. Their nature is to fight first and converse later. Outcomes of bouts determine hierarchy, and no grudges are held by the losing party. Several journals speak on the Gestrals' willingness to aid past expeditions, but also the danger in confronting them. Recently, the Gestrals have been harried by Nevrons and even attacked by white-haired Renoir, so have retreated into the sheltering boughs of their red forest sanctuary. Here, their Sakapatat automatons patrol hidden paths. As creations of Verso, the Gestrals aren't impacted by the Gamage, and death isn't an end. Rather, the dead are petrified, transformed into trees for a time, while they await rebirth in the mystical waters of the sacred river. This isolated religious site is where Gestrals offer chroma in rituals to bring life back to those who have passed. Expedition 33 earns the Gestrals' trust and access to their village, where Golgra might aid their journey. She directs them to another mythical figure, Esquier, but first challenges them to prove their strength. Here, within the Gestral Colosseum, they cross paths with Ciel, another expeditioner and survivor of the beach landing. Ciel escaped Nevrons and Renoir, fell in with the Gestrals, and used her skills to become their champion. No longer alone, she joins the growing expedition, who now turn towards Esquier's lair. Like the Gestrals, Esquier is a natural inhabitant of the canvas, marked with great power and ability by the young Verso. He was the child's closest companion, a friend whose humor and effervescent personality banish sadness or depression. Despite cuddly appearances, Esquier has unequaled strength, strange magic that can be used by the expedition to quickly travel across the continent's variable terrain. In exchange for recovering his lost rocks, which grant him these powers, Esquier offers his service to the expeditioners. While they venture across Nevron-infested geography and haunting ruins, the group learns more of the continent, the fracture, and those who came before. They recover lost journal entries left to guide future teams, illuminating the wonders and dangers of the world. 33 also happens upon Nevrons quite unlike those they frequently battle. These Nevrons, bleached and unpigmented by chroma, are flawed creations, or perhaps a form of fallen angel. Filled with self-consciousness, they wax tragically about their purpose and offer melancholy introspection. The White Nevrons talk of their meaning and how it conflicts with an internal desire to cause no harm. They speak of light and darkness, and of their mistress, not the Paintress. To Expedition 33, the White Nevrons are a mystery, but one that eventually directs them towards the truth. That Nevrons are created by the painted Clair rather than the Paintress Aline. Another trail of breadcrumbs is left by an assembly of fading characters. Like the Curator, they are ashen and without identity or form. These are the memories and essence of the real-world Desange family. Most significant is the fading boy, the sliver of Verso's soul that remains, the youngling who brought this world to life. From his cryptic messages about family, memory, and the canvas, a blurred picture comes into focus. As time goes, the fading boy loses more of himself. Verso's soul, preserved for so long, is dissolving. He mentions half-forgotten names of his father Renoir and sister Claire. In the painter's workshop, he tries desperately to warn the expeditioners of the Nevrons and the tortured version of Claire that has been repainted. The fading woman, found later, who speaks only with Maël, berates her and others in the family. This is most certainly a vestige of the real-world Claire, a stain that talks of vengeance against the riders for Verso's death and Alicia's mistake. Unfortunately for the expeditioners, much of this information is currently and hopelessly convoluted. At the Stone Cliff Caves, where one of Esquier's rocks has been taken, Expedition 33 happens upon remnants of the old world and scars of life after the fracture. Keep in mind, 15 years passed between the fracture and Lumiere's reinstatement of the expeditionary force. 15 years survivors on the continent struggled against Gommage, Nevron, the painted Renoir, and countless other trials. In the Cliff Caves, we see a shrine dedicated to the Paintress. In uncertain times, people flocked to Constancy, and though they knew little of her, it appears survivors of the fracture worshipped the Paintress in hopes of protection. Further on, farmland ruins give insight into how people might have tried to live after the fracture. Unfortunately, the continent's dangers proved too much for any survivors to last long. Act 1's climax occurs at the end of the Stone Cliff Caves. A particularly frightening Nevron called the Lamp Master guards Esquier's magical rock. After a bitter twofold fight, 33 defeat the Nevron, and with the stone are free to traverse the waters that separate them from their task. But victory is short-lived. The white-haired man, who's pursued them since the beach landing, has finally caught up. In a flash, he pierces Gustav's heart and traps Maël within a chroma bubble. Gustav gives everything to protect his sister, and even surprises the man with his Lumina Converter's power. But everything isn't enough. The unofficial heart of Expedition 33 is ripped out with Gustav's last breath. The white-haired man, meanwhile, berates Maël for her interference and attempts to enlighten her. An out-of-body experience sends fragments of Alicia's memory back to Maël, but still, her identity remains trapped. As Renoir, the white-haired man, prepares to erase Maël, he's thwarted by the sudden arrival of a stranger to the expedition. This, the painted Verso, continues his charge of protecting Maël, and his confrontation with Renoir reveals the pair had long ago fallen out, with the white-haired and masked Alicia caught between father and son. Verso protects the expedition's retreat. At camp, as the shock of Gustav's death settles upon the team, Verso introduces himself as a member of Expedition 0, but divulges nothing else. He tells them the white-haired man, Renoir, was the expedition's commander, and that for reasons unknown, both men have been blessed or cursed with immortality and immunity from the Gamage. This lie is to obscure the truth of the canvas world and the expeditioner's reality. Facts that, if they came to light, would most certainly position the expedition against Verso, for he too desires the Paintress's death. Act 2 focuses heavily on Verso's significance in the conflict, his expertise in traveling the continent, and his interactions with the other expeditionary members.
So, if I want to kill Renoir, I have to kill the Paintress first. What's your name?
Verso.
The tragedy that closes Act 1 hangs heavily above Act 2's opening moments. Verso divulges that the monolith and the Paintress are impervious behind a nearly unbreakable wall of pure chroma.
Gigi and Edmund were leading. They were on a clean glide to the monolith when they flew into some sort of barrier and just gomaged away. Our gliders are useless without a way past the barrier.
And indeed, those expeditions that had reached the monolith in the past were instantly gomaged after contacting its barrier. A key vulnerability, however, lies outside the monolith, in Old Lumiere, the haunted ruins of a lost civilization, the Paintress's heart. A detour to bury Gustav and honor his sacrifice brings the team to the forgotten battlefield. This petrified graveyard of thousands of Lumiereans, of rubbled fortresses, broken siege engines, and Nevron husks illustrates brutally how long this war has lasted and its terrible cost. That Gestrel and Grandis corpses also litter the battlefield highlight the camaraderie between all races in fighting the Nevrons. According to Verso, most of the dead here were slain by a single Nevron of inimitable skill. But here too is a glade fitting to put Gustav to rest. As the party breaks down in argument over mourning, regret, and purpose, the dangerous Nevron, the dueliste, strikes, and they plummet into a macabre chasm filled with frozen remains of countless dead. United, Expedition 33 overcomes the Nevron's sword strikes and emerges victorious. This unhallowed burial solidifies for all why they must succeed. They must make the sacrifice of those before them worthwhile to preserve Lumiere's future. Eventually, Verso brings the expedition to a single tree surrounded by dozens of graves. This was where Verso buried his comrades. It's here where Julie and other members of Search and Rescue questioned Verso and believed him a traitor, forcing his hand before the truth got out. He silenced them forever out of what he thought at the time was necessity, but remorse has eaten him over the decades. Another facet of Verso's life of which Expedition 33 remains ignorant. Their next task is to venture north to Monaco's station, where they might recruit much-needed aid before entering Old Lumiere. The frigid husk of an old Lumiere train station is hidden sanctuary of the continent's remaining Grandis. An ancient race, like the Gestrels, that following the fracture transformed to myth within New Lumiere. Grandis are large, furred creatures whose eloquence and intelligence sets them apart from the Gestrels. Their bouts are duels of poetry and prose. They sling words rather than punches. The Gestrel Monaco lives among the Grandis here, and he's unique for his race. Another companion who, like Esquier, was painted by the child Verso, Monaco, is the anthropomorphized version of the Desange family dog. His friendship with the painted Verso goes as far back as either can recall, though neither remember exact details. Monaco is a strong warrior, a wise sage, and a magician able to transform into any beast he's felled. Though hesitant at first to join, Monaco can't resist the opportunity for thrilling fights in Old Lumiere. And here, the Gestrel hints at Mael's true nature. He knows as well as Verso the girl's similarities with Alicia.
Look, you doofus. Don't you recognize her?
Of course I do.
Then you know what that means. This is our shot. It might be our only shot.
This is your only shot.
Shortly after descending into the plaintive, abandoned avenues of Old Lumiere, the bones of which evoke trauma felt with the fracture and the legendary battle between Simon of Expedition 0 and the Axon that once towered above the city, Expedition 33 is separated. Lune and Ciel air their suspicions of Verso and uncover a journal left by the 58th, whom Verso had joined decades ago, that in part confirms their fears. Verso's not the man he's led them to believe. Renoir wasn't his commander on Expedition 0. They were father and son. Lune and Ciel wonder at Verso's true motives. Meanwhile, Verso guides Maëlle throughout the city's dangerous remains until she happens upon an estate built near Lumiere's fringes. This is the Manor House, a painted replica of the real-life Desange family residence, and potentially one created after the first painted manor was shattered during the fracture. Though again, this remains largely speculation. Verso's right, in a sense. The Paintress's heart does reside here, but it's not some organ or structure. It's her family. The painted version of Aline's family dwelt with her here, those decades before the fracture, and even after, Alicia and Renoir remain. They are Aline's vulnerability. Verso led Maëlle here because he knew Aline would open the manor doors to her own daughter, and by so doing, open a small window in her own heart through which Verso could plunge his blade. But Verso's thwarted by the arrival of Renoir and the rest of Expedition 33. His pedigree as a member of the Desange family is revealed, a significant truth that can't be absorbed until after the team's confrontation with Renoir. At the end of this fight, Maëlle experiences another hallucination, another moment in which her real memories slip over her false life.
Why can't you accept who you are?
Here, she witnesses the family manor set ablaze, the moments of Alicia's failure and Verso's sacrifice. She senses a strong connection to the masked, burned girl, but again is denied enlightenment when the manor vanishes. Verso missed his opportunity, and the Paintress retreats behind the safety of her barrier. As the expedition struggles to grip the lies, half-truths, and motives of Verso, and as he in turn attempts to make his case, one final option presents itself in the Curator.
We found 58 and their journals.
So that's how you... I wasn't hiding it. If that's what you're implying. It's a dead end.
Wait, what are you talking about?
There is someone else who can help us.
Axons, the manifestations of the Desange family, painted by the real Renoir countless years ago, are beings of immense chroma, and in their hearts radiates pure energy, theoretically powerful enough to break the Paintress's barrier.
Look, to create this weapon, he needs enormous amounts of pure chroma, which is way beyond what we can get from Nevrons. The only source are axons, yes. But like I said, that's a dead end, it's impossible.
The mysterious Curator can fashion a weapon, but it must be charged with the axon's chroma. Of the four, only two remain, Sirène, the dancer, and the masked Visage. To destroy the axons is Expedition 33's next task, and at this point the overall story branches personally. Yes, this is a tale of 33's heroics, but it's built upon individual stories, the tales of the expeditioners themselves, and Verso acts as the sounding board by which we learn more about each member of the team. Lune, a clinical and curious mind, is the daughter of two of Lumiere's preeminent scientists, and after their deaths has inherited both their experiments and their voracious desire for knowledge. So obsessed with their research were they that the pair conceived Lune because they wished to have an apprentice who didn't need to go home after work. She is the expedition's rational voice. She adheres to protocol. She calculates and plans for everything. Though this can be misconstrued as cold indifference, Lune is a deeply emotional character who bottles up her feelings, allowing them to burn within her and using that energy as a motivator. She also has a strong love of music and in another life might have been an artist. Lune is critical in confronting Sirène, the mesmerizing enchantress who plays with emotions and muddies thought. Recall, Sirène is the manifestation of Aline through Renoir's eyes, painted to remind him of her charming and lively movements. Many expeditions have succumbed to madness or worse just by gazing upon her and listening to her lilting melodies. Lune's parents were part of an expedition that met their end on Seren's Island near the tail of her dress. As their journal entry tells us,
Brigitte finally succumbed to her infection. She fought off that blasted Nevron for 4 days and 4 nights, saving the rest of us, but it gashed her badly. Toward the end, she seemed almost peaceful. She said not to worry. Her daughter Lune will finish their work.
This personal history, combined with Lune's mastery over her emotions, renders her immune to Seren's enchantments and allows her to land the killing blow on the Axon. Ciel is a lover of life, accepting its many trials and embracing its joys. She wears her heart on her sleeve and is without pretense. Ciel wasn't always calm and carefree. Originally a farmer, she married and gave birth to a child, but Gommage and circumstance took both members of her family from her. In the depths of despair, Ciel contemplated suicide and swam out from Lumiere until exhaustion overwhelmed her. Miraculously, though, she woke up alive back on the island's shore, and it's later revealed Ciel was rescued by Esquier, hence her familiarity with the bundle of happiness. Ciel survived her ordeal, but bore the mental and physical scars of trauma for some time and remains averse to water. Eventually, she settled into the role of teacher, a position where she finds purpose and passion. Ciel's acceptance of her inner demons, the terms she struck with her own psyche, help her when Expedition 33 confronts Visage. This Axon, Renoir's depiction of his son Verso, wears many faces and hides truth with lies. After a grueling battle, it's revealed the Mask Keeper is the true Axon, protected behind the illusory Visage. Though the Axon traps all other members with masks of false identity, Ciel is immune and defeats him. An interesting side note, the fading man that appears before confronting each Axon is a vestige of the painter Renoir, a memory of himself as he painted the Axons, suggesting they may be much older than his return to the canvas and subsequent fracture. Maëlle is a wayward soul, one marked by greatness but trapped by naivety and condition. She's always been a dreamer, always looked to the horizon and never felt as though she belonged anywhere. Maëlle joined the expedition at a young age to escape Lumiere's prison, and perhaps to find belonging in the continent's wilds. But the horror of 33's beach landing and the death of Gustave have left her heart jaded. Not only this, she's plagued by nightmares and half-memories of another life, another person close to the Desange family that she can't quite solve. Alicia lives within Maëlle, and from her true self is born the alien Wanderlust. Verso trickles precious little information to her in Expedition 33, for he fears they might not aid him if they learn the truth of the canvas. But like a brother, he does care deeply for Maëlle, and the pair begin to forge a strong familial bond.
To give it to you.
Why?
Maëlle, due to her nature, is singled out by the curator to deliver him the Axon's chroma, and it's to Maëlle that he entrusts the barrier breaker weapon, which further links this mysterious shade to her. Armed with enough power to disrupt the Paintress's force field, Expedition 33 crosses the barrier and enters the monolith. At its base rests the massive figure they and all Lumiere have obsessed over for lifetimes, the terrible harbinger of Gommage and death. But even their collective might isn't enough to stir the Paintress from her slumber. This isn't the true Paintress, it's simply a puppet, perhaps an Axon-like creation, the strings of which are pulled from high atop the monolith by the Paintress herself. 33 thus embarks on a perilous climb to reach the monolith's summit, which takes them through representations of all the fantastical regions of the continent they've explored thus far. From glades to kelp forests and mountains, the monolith is a recreation of the canvas, and it also houses the Paintress's memories. As Aline's mind withers, it bleeds into the canvas. These ink stains represent some of the most poignant moments in the woman's past, and open a window into her heart. There are memories both cherished and those rather left forgotten. One final image of the Desange couple's intimacy flashes before Renoir materializes. He tries again to dissuade Verso and the expedition with words, revealing a little of the deep pain he's been forced to inherit.
The pain. of losing you she made me inherit it. Punishment, perhaps, for not being there when it mattered.
He can't lose another son, and he's done everything to maintain his family. Renoir attempts to persuade Verso through guilt that he is just as vile as the painters in condemning the canvas to death. The expeditioners know not what destruction he and the Paintress hold at bay. Renoir's desperation is felt in his relentless assault, launching salvos of void energy and summoning a wolf-like dark creature, perhaps another embodiment of the Desange family dogs. The battle is chaotic, and due to the Paintress's protection, Renoir is unconquerable. But as he summons a deluge of magic, the Curator arrives, and its identity is revealed. The Curator is the small power of the real Renoir that escapes and emanates from his prison inside the monolith. It's a shade, a flickering essence, because so much of himself is still trapped, but the Gamage shows Renoir's influence, yet impacts the canvas. The Curator aided Expedition 33 because they were aligned with Renoir's cause, to defeat Aline. The shade's focus on Maëlle was the real Renoir's attempt to rekindle Alicia's memories and liberate her from the paint that Aline had brushed over. Now, he helps Alicia unlock her innate powers as a paintress, and the pair dissolve Renoir completely. Still, Verso hides the truth from the expedition. He can't risk the mission failing at the doorstep of victory. All that remains is a final confrontation with the Paintress at the summit. From the first, the damage to Aline is apparent. Her mind has frayed, perhaps irreparably, from her long stint in the canvas, this fictional reality. She can no longer distinguish between fact and fiction, between past and present. The Paintress speaks in broken sentences.
But the fire. Are you really here? Oh, is he playing tricks again? No. You are his creations, not mine.
But Aline's not convinced. She can't accept that Maëlle is her real-world daughter, and nor does she recall it was her own magic that painted over her. She fears they are all weapons of her husband Renoir, created to cause pain and take by force the last vestige of her deceased son. The fight with the Paintress is like nothing the expeditioners have ever confronted. They face a god, a being with the power to create and destroy countless canvas worlds just like their own, and the Paintress demonstrates her ability to warp space and time. Partway through, she mobilizes the massive mannequin and pulls out her Paintress brush. Aline radiates a fury stoked by her confusion. She rails against Renoir with contempt. Her attacks tear through reality and are filled with such force the expedition can barely withstand. But they prove their collective might, especially with the latent power of another Paintress among them. It comes as a tearful moment that Aline spends the last bit of her energy protecting the expeditioners, her painted creations, before succumbing to her wounds. Verso and Maëlle together banish the Paintress from the canvas, but not before she whispers the name Alicia, which triggers recollection.
Alicia.
To Verso, this is the loss of his mother. He's separated from the real world by space and time and can't find Aline beyond the painting. And yet, he sees it as a necessary sacrifice. Expedition 33 plants their flag in triumph, but it's a false dawn. As the group returns to Lumiere and congratulation flows, Verso and Minoko brood silently. They're the only ones who know what is soon to follow. While revelry fills Lumiere during its hero's homecoming, Verso sits on the pier, clutching the letter painted Alicia wrote, intended for Maëlle, that reveals the truth of the canvas, of the Gamage, and of Renoir's purpose. It was Alicia's hope that Maëlle might find a solution to the conflict that began between the Desange parents over the fate of Verso's canvas. But the letter never meets her gaze.
Perhaps you'll find another way. You who have lived amongst us. Perhaps you differ from your father and your sister, as I differ from mine. Your mother paints life, whilst your father, death. What will you paint?
In a wave of ultimate power, the monolith shatters, and Renoir is liberated. He casts the gamage upon Lumiere. Drained of color and chroma, all dissolve. Verso and Renoir are triumphant. In wiping the canvas, they save Aline from madness, but the cost is destruction of an entire reality. Despite the cataclysm of the gamage, this isn't the end of the tale. By erasing all that Aline had painted, Renoir strips the veneer from Alicia, and her memories come surging back. Maëlle is dead, but the paintress Alicia rises from the ashes with herself and her power restored. But Alicia has lived for over a decade as a creation of the canvas. This has become her home, her life, her reality. She cherishes Lumiere and her friends. She prefers this fictitious life over her scarred, guilt-ridden place in the Desange family. What's more, Maëlle understands the beauty and depth of the canvas, and like Aline, wishes to preserve it.
Alicia.
Actually, I prefer Maëlle.
I think I do too.
In Lumiere's vacant streets, she and Verso meet the curator, who's been restored fully to his power as the painter Renoir. Alicia believes she can convince her father against destroying the canvas, but he's seen the harm that comes to those who don't confront their grief.
This is Verso's only canvas. You can't destroy the last piece of him that we have. This is my home now. You can't just decide—
Your home? After all that with your mother, you want to stay?
You know how little remains of my life outside.
Alicia, you'll die. You've already been here longer than you should.
But—
No. Look at me, I said no. I am not letting my daughter risk her life. Alicia.
I'm not, Mum. I'm not going to lose myself if I stay.
I know full well you will, and I am not doing this again!
He denies Alicia and begins destroying the world's foundation. With her newfound powers as a paintress, Alicia preserves Verso against gamage, and even calls back Lune and Ciel from beyond. Knowing the truth of their existence and of Alicia doesn't discredit that Lune, Ciel, Verso, all beings in the canvas, have consciousness and will, and have experienced the profound depths of humanity. Their reality is tied to a canvas, brushed into being by a painter. Is that truly different than the earth and all its creatures, brought to life by God or some universal soul? Alicia has been living among them as Maëlle. It's the personality she clings to despite knowing her true self, and it's this person Lune and Ciel accept as their own.
Yeah, but I need chroma, and Papa controls all the chroma in the canvas.
No. Not all of it. The expeditioners, the ones killed by Nevrons. Gustave noticed their chroma remains in their bodies. They never dissipated, like the gamage.
The last act of Expedition 33 is to confront Renoir. Words cross before blades, and again Alicia begs her father to preserve the painting. The place where her life has meaning, potential, hope. Renoir admits destroying the canvas would sever forever the family's last connection to their dead son. But he has seen tragedy and fantasy suffocate Aline. He's almost succumbed to the lure of the paintings in his own past, and he knows if Alicia remains, she'll lose her life.
I know how powerful and intoxicating it is. How deeply attached we can become to the worlds we pour our hearts and souls into. I was enthralled, and it nearly killed me.
It doesn't mean you—
As their fight explodes, Renoir summons his Axon creations, which illustrates his well of power, since the Axons had previously been defeated by the Expeditioners. He's also able to draw strength from the Desange family portrait. This painting within a painting offers bizarre potential for the nature of reality and how different canvases interact with each other and the real world. The expedition, meanwhile, is aided by the arrival of Aline. Renoir's comments suggest how dangerous it can be for a painter weakened by prolonged canvas exposure to enter a world before they recover.
You're going to kill yourself. It's too soon for you to return to any canvas.
Aline's own Paintress marionette defeats the Axons and affords Maël time to deliver a decisive strike. So long, the Desanges have been fighting each other over desire, reason, choice, that the family has forgotten entirely the foundation of relationships: trust. Each member has their reasons for losing trust and faith, but it's this sentiment Maël rekindles within Renoir.
So trust her. If she's doing this, then...
I trust what she told me. I want to trust you, but...
You can...
She asks for his trust and promises she'll return to him after her time in the canvas runs its course. Renoir is asked to believe in his daughter, and after seeing who she's become in the new life, accepts and leaves the canvas completely. Through the story's final act, Verso has remained completely silent. A whirlwind of thoughts and emotions swirl within him. He acted from his own position of righteousness to destroy the canvas and exhausted his opportunity. Renoir wavered at the precipice of success and allowed Maël to decide the fate of the canvas. But in the final battle, he left open a rift in the fabric of reality. A portal opens to the magical foundation of the painted world and its metaphysical edge, a place between existences. Seeing his mother, in any form, suffer and self-destruct pushes Verso to act, and he crosses the portal's threshold. In this boundary realm, he shouldn't exist, and indeed Verso begins to gamage, but Aline's gift, when she created him, maintains his corporeal form. One final fight, this time between siblings, unfolds to decide the fate of the Desanges and the canvas. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 offers two possible endings, depending on which sibling you choose to fight as. Their difference is ideological. Verso, who sees his life, Lumiere, the canvas, as nothing more than a projection of Aline's grief, wants it to end. They aren't real. They shouldn't have even been created. Verso sees Aline and Alicia both blinded by a fantasy so powerful it's drawn them in completely and threatens to destroy them. He's of the belief that no matter how difficult or painful, circumstances must be met and accepted, not denied. Alicia, meanwhile, sees the life and joy brought by the canvas. It's a place of beautiful wonder to be celebrated. Her time within the canvas has given Alicia another opportunity at life, a version unburdened by Verso's death, by her physical and psychological scars, by a hollow existence buffeted constantly by her mother's scorn. In the canvas, Alicia can live with her brother and not simply the drowning depression of her mistake. So what if it's a fantasy? It's a better life that makes her happy. Caught between is the fading boy, the final sliver of Verso's soul that perpetuates the painting. It's a cruel reality that the painting can't exist without him, but for it to do so, he must suffer eternally, forced to paint when he'd rather make music or simply rest from his weariness. There's no right answer. Each sibling has their reasons, and each perspective can be understood. But without recourse, they're forced to cross blades within the bowels of the canvas. If Verso proves triumphant, he banishes Alicia from the painting and commences its ultimate destruction. Young Verso's soul finally earns peace, and the Desanges can move past their trauma. Monoko, Esquier, Lune, Ciel, all the inhabitants of the painted world gamage without young Verso to preserve them, and the canvas itself drains of life and chroma. Verso and his soul then walk into beautiful oblivion. This ending allows the real-world Desanges to endure their grief, to finally accept Verso's death and relinquish the past. His memory remains in their hearts, and the family relies on one another for support and joy. If Alicia defeats her brother, the threat of gamage is banished entirely, and Alicia takes over as master of the canvas, free to wield this world's chroma to her whim. Verso begs her to end his existence and destroy the young Verso's soul. To both of them, this is a life of torture, forced to live against their wishes, for the child must paint eternally. But Alicia can't let go of the canvas, of the life she's created and bonds she's formed. She repaints all those whom Renoir erased through the Gamage. Alicia is reunited with the rest of her expedition, her friends and family. Most significantly, Gustave, the brother she had during the time Verso remained unknown to her. During their expedition, Verso revealed to Maël that if the fracture never happened, if the Gamage and Nevrons hadn't existed, he would have played his piano for all and embraced his love of music over painting. Now, Alicia makes that dream a reality, and Lumiere's theater is packed with hundreds to listen to Verso's recital. In the final moments, however, we see Verso hesitate at the keys, and Alicia's face is masked by the magic of the Paintress. This suggests that still Verso is living a life he doesn't want, and that Alicia is forcing him to play against his will. In this ending, Alicia, like her mother before her, is intoxicated by the fantasy of another life, and her own fate is left to speculation. Will she prove strong enough to leave the canvas before she dies, or is the retreat too alluring to resist? Thanks so much for watching and listening to this video on the complete story of Clair Obscur Expedition 33 Explained. Let me know your thoughts on the painted world, on Aline, Verso, Maël, Renoir, and all the others, as well as topics from the game you'd like to learn more about in detail in the comments below. And if you're a fan of lore and storytelling, be sure to subscribe to the channel where content is uploaded frequently. I want to take a moment to thank all of my patrons over on Patreon. Your support means the world to me and helps the channel continue to improve. If you'd like to become a lore luminary for access to me, a great community, written scripts, and early video drops, head to patreon.com/thelorebrarians to learn more. Until next time, go forth and explore the lore.